Hey guys, what's going on? So today we're going to be taking a look at a video that no one's ever made before, completely unique and something that I came up with all by myself, and that is, should you be a vampire in ESO in 2023? Also just wanted to point out that 92% of you guys aren't subscribed, and that's not very cool, so if you could subscribe so I can become a better person by having more subscribers, that'd be ideal, so thank you in advance. So jumping into the video then itself, essentially just before we get started, I want to mention that there's 3 things I'm not going to go over in this particular video. So I'm not going to go over how to become a vampire, I'm not going to go over how to level up a vampire, and I'm not going to go over how to join an 18+ vampire role-playing guild. Okay, so Azura ESO actually is heavily into this kind of thing. If you want to go over to her channel, she will actually be able to help you out with that. Okay, so just make sure to leave a comment on any of her videos saying I want to join your vampire role-playing guild, and she will invite you in game. Okay, so jumping into the video then, we're going to have to take 2 different outlooks on this. Okay, so all the passives and all the skills are used very differently in PvE and PvP. So what we're going to look at is the PvE section first, and then we're going to go into PvP. So we're going to look at the passives in the PvE section first, because those are the most beneficial, because you don't really use too many vampire skills in PvE. So the first passive is kind of like the main one, so it is Feed. Essentially this just details all the negative effects you're going to get whenever you're at different stages of vampirism. So if, for example, you're level 4 vampirism, you're going to lose 100% of your health recovery. You're going to take 20% more damage from flame damage. You're going to have all your abilities that aren't vampire based cost 12% more. And then the kind of benefit is your vampire abilities cost 24% less, but you're pretty much never going to use a vampire ability in PvE anyway, so that doesn't really matter. So they're mostly all negatives. Now, the reason low health recovery is an issue is because that means that unless you heal yourself or someone heals you, you're not going to regenerate any health whatsoever, so you can pretty much just die over time because you're not going to be possibly recovering the health. Obviously more flame damage taken, so if you're a level 4 vampire here, you know, 20% extra flame damage, that's going to be the difference between being alive and being low health and the majority of any, you know, hard content. Obviously if you're on like normal dungeons, it doesn't really matter too much, but anything veteran or any veteran trials, you're pretty much going to get smashed with this. Regarding the ability cost, so if you're a stage 4 vampire, which in my opinion you should never be stage 4 vampire, by the way, level 3 is the highest you should be, but say you were, okay, 12% regular ability cost is just so much. You're not going to be able to maintain a rotation if you're a DPS. You're going to struggle to survive on tank or struggle to heal on healer. And there's even sets out there, 5-piece sets, which give way less recovery for this as their 5-piece bonus. So this is just something you really don't want to be like overdoing if you do decide to be a vampire. And again, ability cost for vampire is pretty simple. It's just cost less to cast this. So the next passive then is Dark Stalker. So this is irrelevant for PvE, okay, because you're not really going to be sneaking, and it doesn't matter how fast you move in sneak. The next one is Strike from the Shadows. Now, unless you're in a really high-end raid team where you're going for like server record, this is irrelevant, okay? So you're never really going to benefit from the 6 seconds of increased spell and weapon damage, because fights take multiple minutes, some of them take 10 minutes, okay? Like, they're really long fights. This is such like an insignificant part. It's not worth getting all the negatives for this little tiny bonus, okay? So the next passive is On Death, okay? This is probably the most useful one, okay? This is the reason people think that they want to be a vampire in PvE. And basically what it does is it reduces your damage taken by up to 30% based on your missing health. Now, the problem with this then is that you have to be less than 100% health and actually quite low health to benefit from the full effect of this, okay? So if you're a damage dealer, for example, you're quite squishy as is, okay? On paper this sounds like a benefit, okay, but you've got to weigh the benefit of this up with the negatives of like the damage increase from flame and, you know, the recovery, things like that being affected. And also you got to take into account that, say you're a damage dealer and you're on like 6k health, okay, so you've got the full benefit of this 30% damage reduction. If you're going to get hit by an attack that does like 15k damage, anything like large in a dungeon, you're still going to die, it doesn't matter. And people don't really consider that. And then even again on a tank, you know, you really don't want to be sitting at low health on a tank for any reason. Like, yes, this does help you sort of not die essentially, but again, I think the recovery and for the health recovery and just having your abilities cost less and taking less flame damage is much more beneficial than this little passive, so I would not be a vampire in PvE personally. So we have Blood Ritual as our next passive. It does nothing but let you infect someone else with vampirism. And then Unnatural Movement, which again, there's no benefit for PvE here, okay, and you never want to be a stage 4 vampire in my opinion regardless. So going over the skills, we have Blood Cyclone. So essentially you're never going to use this in PvE. If you're in a dungeon or you're in a trial, unless you're in like a normal one where you're just kind of doing it for fun and you want to be a vampire, this is not a good skill, so you should never really use it, okay? Faster rate, again, this basically just means the lower your health, the more damage you do, up to 33%, okay? You never really want to base your build on being low health, okay? Because that is sort of a recipe for dying, and then it doesn't matter. You did like 1k, 2k extra DPS because you're now dead. Not really. And also it's not as good as other spammables, so I wouldn't use this anyway. So then we have our Blood Frenzy toggle. So essentially this one just increases your weapon and spell damage by a bit each tick, but it also costs health over time. So the thing is that if you manage this incorrectly, you're gonna die, okay? It's something that you would only really use in a very, very tailored group in trials. You know, you wouldn't really be using this outside of trials or really, really speedrunning content at any stretch. And even when you're using it, again, it's quite a detriment to yourself because you can't be dying from that by not managing it properly or taking a bit of damage on top of the tick. Vampiric Drain, again, so it gives you a bit of health back for the damage you induce on someone else. Now again, you need to channel this for 3 seconds. It's really going to interfere with your rotation. I would never use this as a damage skill, and there's heals out there which are way better and way more passive, okay? So Mesmerize, essentially this is just to stun enemies. They can't block it, so that is a benefit, but not really for PvE, because what are you really stunning in PvE? Generally, if you stun something in PvE and a tank can't chain it or move it, it's quite irritating, so you don't actually want this skill at all, in my opinion. And then looking at Mistform again, so for 1 second, the next 3 projectiles that hit you do no damage, okay? You then dash forward, and casting this within 4 seconds costs 33% more. So you can't really spam this or your magic is going to disappear and it's going to be really bad. 1 second of no damage isn't really that beneficial, to be completely honest with you. And it's just not a skill you're going to want to use on the bar. It's not worth the slot, okay? It's a bad skill overall. So from the PvE perspective then, I would say don't be a vampire. There's not much benefit, there's quite a lot of negative. If you come up with some really specific build and, you know, or maybe if you're doing a really specific end game trial and you think there's not a lot of flame damage and don't need that much recovery, but you can benefit from the, you know, the reduced damage near low health, sure. But that's a very niche case, and like just generally as a blanket statement, don't use a vampire in PvE. Okay, so now we're going to go over all this from a PvP standpoint, okay? So obviously all the passives have different meanings now, different uses, and all the skills have different uses, okay? So again, I stand by not being over a level 3 vampire, okay? If you're level 4 vampire in any circumstance, I think you're doing it wrong. I think the negatives are far too high, okay? I think you should never have 100% health recovery taken away. You should never take 20% extra damage from flame. You should never be looking to pay 12% extra to cast any ability. And yeah, you're not going to use the vampire abilities generally anyway, so that is not really a benefit for the reduced cost of those. Also, if you're not going to be level 4, it makes unnatural movement irrelevant, okay? Now, it sounds like an okay perk to have, okay, but it's not worth being level 4. Being invisible when sprinting isn't really that beneficial unless you're on a gank build, but again, like, there's no need for it, okay? You can just be invisible on a Nightblade, etc., okay? Again, Blood Ritual, pretty irrelevant, just like it turns someone else into a vampire. Undeath, actually really beneficial in PvP in my opinion, so a lot of PvP is kind of like baiting your opponent and playing mental games with them. So if you're dueling them and you're low health but you're going to take a reduced amount of damage, they're going to overextend, they're going to try and use all their abilities and leave themselves vulnerable. You're going to be harder to kill, you can then counter them and kill them, okay? So Undeath is actually a really good passive for PvP in my opinion. So Strike from the Shadows, again, really, really good on a gank build, Nightblade especially. So if you're going to be sneaking and then coming out of that to like hit an end cap, something like that, you get your extra spell damage and your extra weapon damage. Really, really beneficial. It can be the difference between one hitting an enemy and not one hitting them. So Darkstalker, again, this is actually really good in PvP if you're going to be making a stealth build or you want to make like a Nightblade gank build. So you can get into sneak 50% quicker, which I think is really good because a lot of time you're in there, you're trying to kill someone. If it doesn't succeed, you need to get back out again pretty quick. And you also get to move faster, okay? So again, that's really nice because usually if you sneak, you don't have this passive, you can't get away because they'll just walk over to you and you're going so slow they'll find you. Now, regarding skills, the Blood Cyclone, again, I don't think this is good at all for PvP either. Now, if you're busting into a keep in Cyrodiil and you want to be a distraction and kind of make it hard to kill you so the rest of your team can do stuff, sure, there's like a slight sort of case for that. but that's very niche, and I would say generally this is a bad skill and you don't want to use it. A faster rate again, so you don't want to build, especially a PvP build, on being low health in my opinion. And there's also better spammables out there, so I would never use this. So to toggle, again, there may be a build where you want to toggle and then try and, you know, get a quick kill off, but again, it's sort of really specific to like gank builds, and it's also quite risky and it gives away your position. So even then, it's very niche. So 9 times out of 10, this is an unusable skill. So Vampiric Drain, again, a 3-second channel. You don't really want to do channels in PvP. Maybe you can do like an Arcanist Beam because there's so much damage, okay. You can maybe do a Templar Beam because there's so much damage, okay. This isn't doing anywhere near that much damage, okay. And the healing isn't as good as if you just slotted a different heal, like a passive heal. So again, I think this is a pretty irrelevant skill for PvP, and I would never use it. Now, Mesmerize, it can be used to subdue all the enemies in front of you, so it's nice because you can hit more than one person. The stun can't be blocked, so that's also nice. This means if you're doing like a bomb build or something, or you're trying to just like frontline for your team to stun all the enemies and, you know, give your team time to kill them, sure. But again, very niche. Not going to be part of most builds. It's not something that you want to use, in my opinion. Only really if you're going to be like a bomber on a Nightblade or something like that. And again, there's a lot of other stuns on a lot of other classes, so you don't really need this, okay. And Mistform, again, they've changed Mistform from the old one when it was really good. 1 second worth 3 projectiles will do no damage to you, in my opinion, isn't that much of a benefit to slot the skill. Plus, it costs so much more to recast it. So if you try and recast it within 4 seconds, it costs 33% more. Now, obviously, it keeps going up and up, so gonna get it, you know, eating all your magic away. So I would never use this skill personally. So from a PvP standpoint, I think it is actually, yeah, worth your while being a vampire, depending on your build. I think if you're a stealth build or a Nightblade ganker, anything like that, you should be a vampire because there's a lot of benefits for you. I think if you're just like a duelist, really, you don't necessarily want to be a vampire because a lot of the sneak stuff isn't going to benefit you at all. And the undeath is nice, but you are going to take 20% maybe, or sorry, 13% more flame damage from DKs. So even that's bad. You want to maybe just be like a normal person so you're not getting all those negatives, okay? So that was pretty much my take on being a vampire in 2023. I think it's pretty useless in PvE, and I think PvP, you're pretty much just wanting the passives on a couple of like gank specific builds, not really all the builds, okay? So being a vampire is kind of mid. It's not as good as it used to be, you know. The passive used to be better and some of the skills used to be better, but yeah, it's up to you. If you want to roleplay and be a vampire, you can do, but it's just not that great in PvE. So anyway guys, if you liked the video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.